We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator.
Welcome to The Pursuit, a podcast where we examine and explore life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness 250 years after the Declaration of Independence and the founders declared those rights as unalienable and inherent in all people. In the waning days of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, a woman named Elizabeth Willing Powell, who was a political activist and Philadelphia socialite, asked Benjamin Franklin, "What do we have? A republic or a monarchy?" Franklin responded with, "A republic if you can keep it." Powell was asking whether the framers were creating a system run by the people or by a king. We forget that the framers were actually working in secret. No one outside a small circle of people knew exactly what they were doing because they didn't agree with the assignment they'd been given. They were charged by the Continental Congress with the task of amending the Articles of Confederation, not creating a whole new system of government, which is what they did. But most of them, including James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington, knew that the Articles of Confederation weren't a strong enough structure to do the things a young country needed to do or stand the test of time. So when asked if they were creating a republic or a monarchy, Franklin's response was, "A republic if you can keep it." That response has reverberated through the ages, still echoing off ballots when we cast them each election. For 250 years, we have held on to it. We've kept it. We've strived to live up to the sacred creed in the Declaration of Independence from 1776, that all people are created equal and that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inherent rights of all people. Our country has created great wealth and prosperity. We've made advancements in technology, healthcare, manufacturing, science that our founders could have never dreamed of. But it hasn't always met, and in fact, probably rarely meets, the high-minded aspirations of the Declaration of Independence. Across the country, and right here in northern Minnesota, one of the most accurate predictors of how long someone will live is the zip code they live in. The health disparity between wealthy neighborhoods and poor and middle-income neighborhoods is stark. We have greater wealth inequality in our country right now than we've had since before the Great Depression. The kind of economic disparity that our founders feared, what Thomas Jefferson called the artificial aristocracy. The spirit of that sacred creed, the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was entombed in the document that was tasked with ensuring that our values of democracy outlived any era, any strife, any president. That document is, of course, our Constitution that was being drafted in Philadelphia. Through the framework of that Constitution, and with blood, sweat, and protest, the rights that were once reserved only for wealthy landowners were slowly, too slowly, granted to women and people of color. Sometimes we elevate the founders almost to sainthood, but we know that while they had an incredible vision for democracy collectively, many of them were enslavers. Many had despicable views about and committed atrocities upon Native people. And they were all men. Not a single woman signed any of our founding documents. Despite all those things, they laid the groundwork for a democracy that has lasted for 250 years, that has survived a civil war, multiple world wars, and a reckoning on suffrage and racial and economic injustice. Though the common perception is that the genius of the founders set forth this perfect system, we've spent the last 250 years fending off the demons that the founders saw lurking in the shadows. Inequality, corruption, the consolidation of power. They knew the Constitution was far from perfect. It was riddled with compromises necessary to hold the coalition together, not the least of which was the 3/5 compromise and limiting power to landowning men. Their concerns with its imperfection, was reflected in a speech that Franklin wrote and had read for him the same day that he was asked that question by Elizabeth Powell. In that speech, he talked about that other forms of government have descended into despotism, governments run by kings and tyrants, and that our government, the government the framers were putting together, could have the same fate, because he knew that the power and the promise of a democratic republic only begins with the Constitution, and it cannot be sustained by the Constitution alone. The people have to choose to keep it. The people have to participate in it through voting, through lobbying, through serving community at every level of government and in our economy, and by living the values of a democracy every day in our communities. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All these years later, we often take those words for granted, those simple words, those amazing words for granted. When the founders made that declaration, that was the first time in the history of humanity that anyone had thought to write that down. So what does the Declaration of Independence mean today, 250 years later? Does it even matter anymore? Is it worth reflecting on anymore? I think it is. 2026 will mark 250 years since the founders declared that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were unalienable rights inherent to all people. That 250-year mark is a good time for us to take stock of who we are. Are we honoring that creed? How has the pursuit of happiness evolved in the last 250 years? Where do we see it going next? What gives us hope? What makes us fearful? In 2025, I'll be launching a new podcast to explore these questions and more. We'll hear interviews and stories from regular people about life, being a parent in the 21st century, marriage in the 21st century, or not being married and not having kids in the 21st century, about liberty in our economy and our banking and crypto and housing and reproductive health, in our service to our country, and the pursuit of happiness in our occupations, through education, art, expression, through faith and spirituality. We'll focus this project on northern Minnesota, but we'll talk more broadly than that too. If you know someone you think has a story to tell, let me know. If you have a story to tell, let me know. So I hope you'll stay tuned. I hope you'll join us as we dive in and explore the most fundamental aspects of our existence on this planet, our life, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness.